are you doing? What are you doing? Come on.
That is not paid for by them. That is paid for by the people of Detroit.
You might be qualified, ML.
I'm not qualified for this job.
Let me tell you something. You want to go right now? Okay? You want to go right now, Albert?
They were getting so high in Lansing, where they often get high on their own supply. But this time they were getting high on weed money. That's right, some of the most powerful people in Lansing, including a former Speaker of the House, have admitted to taking bribes to help people get a leg up in the marijuana industry. Joining us to talk about it today is my least favorite reporter in the whole world, mainly because he keeps writing these stories for the competition. But Craig Mauger joins us from Lansing to talk about a big scoop that he had last week, one of a series of big scoops on big people in big trouble, taking big money illegally. And Craig joins us from Lansing, where hopefully he's not going to be working too hard today. We would appreciate that if you take a personal day, kind of maybe take a little Austin Meadows time and just relax. Don't push yourself too much. We have another guest here who actually has a higher batting average than Austin Meadows, which actually might include all of us. I don't want to pick on Austin, but
really,
nobody on the Tigers
doing a
is
decent job.
Really, I thought he's relaxing. This is all.
So you're going to diminish depression and anxiety by calling it relaxing? Eh?
Well, you know I hate everybody, Shawn. You can provide us some reminders.
Either change with the times, or
Okay, Michael Mulata is here. He has a higher batting average than Javi Baez. Is that okay?
There you go.
And I could use some personal time.
There you go.
For sure.
But now,
punch up.
Now Shawn is going to say that I'm biased.
Punch up, not down, and you're good.
Parker Meadows?
Okay.
He's not. Okay. Anyway, so Michael's here, former federal prosecutor, helped put Kwame Kilpatrick in prison, to talk a little bit about where this case may be heading, because he knows how these deals go. When people come in, they plead guilty on an information. He'll tell you a little bit about why that's significant and where this cooperation could take us. And you know that voice. You know that admonishment. You know that holier than thou, that sort of I'm better than you, even though I think you think you're better than me, but I'm not going to try and do that. It's I'm
not really projecting. That's
Audrey,
your thing.
the Audrey Meadows of our podcast.
That's
She's fantastic.
We don't project over
She's
here.
an Emmy winner, I think. She's very big. Mr. Shawn Windsor.
No. Keep doing what you're doing. It's okay.
Well, I was, but you interrupted me, so I had to stop for a minute. And Mark Fellhauer is not here with us. We can't say for sure whether he is cutting a deal with the feds to plead guilty to something. It's entirely possible. You have no idea what goes on in this basement, and based on some of the smells that I encountered when I came down here,
that'd be gasoline.
There may be something illegal. Was it gasoline?
I got it all over myself, putting gas in my car on the way here. I didn't realize it until I got my car.
You are a man of the people.
You know what I mean?
You didn't have the guy at Sinclair check your windshield and check the oil?
No, there wasn't anybody in a bow tie running
fill
out
it up
to
with ethyl?
wipe the windshield off. No.
Okay. I just love that Sinclair logo where they have the dinosaur. It's kind of like if you want to know where your food comes from at an oil company, you should have a dinosaur on there because it's all fossil fuels.
Do you miss the days when you pull up to a station and 2 or 3 people run out and start taking care of your car, kind of like you're at a racetrack and they're going to change your tires to get it on pit road?
How old do you think we are?
Well, you've been around for a bit.
I don't know. Now who's picking on people? Now you're ageist? Is that what this is?
Is that it?
It seems like it, but we got to get to this. We got to thank the people who make this show possible. That's David Hall of Hall Financial. Can help get you a great deal on a refi or help you buy your first house or maybe your next house. He helped me purchase a couple rental properties, and he can do a great deal with you. We'll be talking about how David can help you. And Luke Nowacki of Pinnacle Wealth Strategies. If you're watching the stock market, if you're thinking about retirement, if you're worried about whether you are in shape to make the long haul, let Luke and his team at Pinnacle Wealth Strategies help you. Relax. Don't be anxious. Just kind of chill. When you're thinking about meadows, think about green meadows, pastures. Just kind of chill. And Luke can tell you, we'll tell you about how Luke can help you get to that easy retirement, which is the one everybody wants. And, of course, the Caju Cafe is open for business. Music almost every night of the week. The kitchen is open late. The weather is great. This would be a perfect night to get outside and hear some live music or hang out at the Garage Bar. We'll tell you how you can find out when those are open and what's going on at the Caju just in a moment after we thank Craig Mauger for coming on. And, Craig, I think I've stalled you getting another scoop as long as I possibly can. It's time for you to take a victory lap and tell us about how you broke this big story. And if you would please give us your secret sources and their cell phone numbers in the course of this conversation, we'd really appreciate it.
Well, I won't do that, but I appreciate you.
Well, Craig, it was great having you on. This is all just a scheme.
No, I appreciate you having me on. I've been working with my colleague at the News, Robert Snell, for multiple months, digging into this investigation, into how the state chose what businesses were going to make a ton of money through the medical marijuana industry. In 2016, lawmakers put in place this kind of complicated framework of regulations for deciding how medical marijuana retailers and growers were going to operate and how they're going to get permission from the state to do that. Rick Johnson, who became the chairman of the licensing board, was actually involved in drafting the legislation. And that industry went from something that was basically underground caregivers based out of people's houses largely into something where now, after marijuana was legalized, recreational marijuana in 2018, now you see a business on every street corner just about in a lot of areas.
This is a massive opportunity for people to make millions, possibly billions. When you think about how what I'm going to call mood-altering substances in Michigan are sold, it's a very archaic model. Beer and wine has to go through distributors. Liquor has to go through distributors. The state is basically, I mean, it's almost like a gangland thing. We're carved up into areas, and this is a quasi monopoly that the industry works very carefully to preserve. So you're not going to break into that, but there's a huge market with marijuana that you could break into. And I've often theorized that the marijuana folks want it to be just like the liquor industry and the beer and wine industry, where they can control a territory, they can make all the money, and basically just sit back and buy super yachts to take Clarence Thomas out on.
You know, that's something we often talk about as we've been reporting out the stories, is that this is the creation of a new industry. This is not something that we've really seen play out for many, many decades. And as this was playing out in 2016, 2017, 2018, as it's still playing out, there was a huge push to get as large of a portion of the industry by a lot of wealthy individuals. Some people you would never think would ever be interested in marijuana were trying to get into this industry. And you had this huge gold rush, as Mark Totten described it, the U.S. attorney during the press conference last week announcing these charges. There was a gold rush to get a portion of this industry, pushing up against the fact that Michigan has some of the weakest ethics laws in the entire nation. And when you have those two factors come together, who would have guessed that there were going to be problems? I mean, a lot of people guessed it. I mean, from the very beginning, there were people questioning how this process was working, why Rick Johnson, a former lobbyist who had very recently had paid lobbying clients, why he was chosen by Senate Majority Leader Arlen Meekhoff and Governor Rick Snyder to lead this licensing board. You can go back and read those stories where people are openly questioning that and saying that it didn't seem right, that he was the person that was picked. And he was picked in May 2017, and the feds have said that they got their first complaints about this and kind of started their investigation at the end of 2017. So within months of him taking the leadership position on this board, the feds started digging around into what was happening.
So do we know who complained and what they complained about?
We don't know who went to the feds initially, but when you're talking about picking businesses, you know, you're picking one business over another business to get into this industry first. You know, if you could guess that there are people out there that probably got an inside look about how these individuals, Rick Johnson and these lobbyists, Vince Brown and Brian Pierce, were going about their operations. You know, there were probably people that heard things. I mean, we were hearing things even at the time as reporters covering this process. It just took a long time for all of these details to come out, and they still haven't come out yet. I mean, this is an investigation that's ongoing. There were a couple of companies who were listed as Company A, Company B, and Company C in what the feds have filed in court so far. We still don't know exactly who those three companies are, who is all tied to them. This is something that's in the very early stages. I mean, this is something that there are a lot of businesses out there that, one could be worried about conversations they may have had with Rick Johnson or Brian Pierce or Vincent Brown, or there could be a lot of businesses out there who are now looking at how things went with trying to get a license from these guys and being very frustrated. Something that I say over and over again is that, yes, at the end of the day, a lot of businesses were able to get licenses and get into this industry. That did happen at the beginning. I mean, at the end of the day, where we are now, there's kind of this oversupply of marijuana product. But in the beginning, those people that got the first licenses, those people that were able to launch their operations early, those are the people that were really best positioned to make a ton of money at the beginning of all of this. So you can see the power that Rick Johnson had to set the agenda, to pick who was going to get in early and have that head start over everyone else.
Craig, tell us who the people are who are in trouble and what they've been charged with.
Yeah, so right now there are 4 people who have been named so far who have been charged, and all 4 of them have agreed to plead guilty as of right now. That's Rick Johnson, the former House Speaker, a former farmer from Leroy, northern Michigan, who became the chairman of the licensing board. He's been charged with accepting bribes over $100,000. You have 2 lobbyists, Vincent Brown and Brian Pierce, who are being charged with a type of conspiracy to commit bribery, working with Rick Johnson to provide him funds to try to influence his decisions. And then there is a 4th individual, John Delali, who is an Oakland County businessman, who is one of the many people who was trying to get into this industry, trying to get a piece of it. And he was charged with offering Rick Johnson bribes, bribing Rick Johnson. He has also agreed to plead guilty, as all 4 have. And they've also agreed to cooperate going forward, which would be a major indicator that this investigation is continuing and that there are, as we know, other potential targets that they're looking at.
Has the state of Michigan said anything about rescinding licenses or taking some action against people who may have got a head start in this industry through nefarious means?
What we have heard from the Cannabis Regulatory Agency is that they're trying to look into all of this. They're trying to investigate. Again, I would caution that this is very difficult to do. The 3 companies that were mentioned, one was listed as Company C in the federal documents. The feds don't want to name the company yet. The company was represented by Brian Pierce and Vincent Brown. We don't know who that company was. We don't know if they knew that these guys were taking money from them to try to bribe Rick Johnson. We don't know what the conditions of their conversations with all these individuals were. But there's this company just sitting out there that was directly involved in this that hasn't been identified yet. So there's really no way for the CRA, the Cannabis Regulatory Agency, to go after that company because they say they don't know who it is, and the feds are refusing to say. There are 2 companies that are tied to John Delali. Those companies have also not been named. And you think it would be easy to determine who those companies are and what license they got, where they're operating now. One of them got a license. It's not easy to determine. A lot of this, the investors in these companies, the people behind these companies, those names have been hidden through various means from the public, and it's not always easy to figure out the connections between an investor and a company. So this is a very complex web. More details are going to come out as this case plays out, and we're going to get all this information. We don't have it all right now.
So I have to say this because Shawn will be upset with me.
I won't.
He's already upset with me, but
no, never.
But he's not judging me.
Never.
He's punching laterally with kind of a
to you it'd be
far
up
left cross
because you're up here.
I don't want to say I'm superior, but
no, you're just more successful.
Res ipsa loquitur, right, Michael? That's a little Latin kicking this morning here on the show. But I have to say this. I'm contractually obligated to mention that Rick Johnson's best buddy when he was the Speaker of the House was Kwame Kilpatrick, and they used to hang out in Rick Johnson's office, and Kwame Kilpatrick would come over to Rick Johnson's office and eat cookies that I think Rick Johnson's wife made or somebody made.
So who made cookies?
So
you're saying that Kwame rubbed off on Rick Johnson?
I guess I'm just saying.
Why were they eating cookies? What were they smoking?
Well, they weren't brownies.
Okay. Well,
This was before this was legal. Because I think there are some laws that Kwame Kilpatrick. See, you love these Kwame stories. He did say in the text messages, Michael, you may remember this.
I may.
That he told Chris Beatty, I sold weed in college, when they were confessing their greatest sins. Of course, they didn't confess their really great sins, but he did say, hey, big secret, I sold weed in college.
I don't remember that one, but I was focused on the ones involving the contracts as opposed to the weed
you're
ones.
Probably thinking the other 400,000.
I'm not suggesting there was weed in the cookies. I'm just saying maybe they had the munchies.
Okay. Anyways, Rick Johnson traveling in sort of the wrong circles. Small town boy comes from Leroy, starts mixing with Kwame Kilpatrick, and now he ends up going to prison. I don't know. Is this a Kilpatrick effect? Is he like the Kevin Bacon of Michigan corruption, or did Kilpatrick get corrupted by Rick Johnson? Any leads on that one, Craig?
Yeah, I don't know about that one. I mean, I've got to say, but I mean, I think it is noteworthy just how brazen this was. That when Rick Johnson was appointed to this board, there were many people quoted in stories, a lot of people making the argument that he was the wrong pick, that there was going to be potential corruption. At all of the meetings just about that I remember attending of the licensing board, there were people that would stand up and accuse him of doing things improperly. They didn't have proof at that time. They would make kind of veiled accusations. He would deny all this, and he would say repeatedly that he got into this because he wanted to help family members who had benefited from using medical marijuana. Just incredibly brazen. While people are accusing you of this, you're denying it, and you're saying that you're acting in an altruistic fashion. That here you are actually doing what everyone was accusing you of behind the scenes.
He just forgot to mention those family members he wanted to help were named Johnson. And and Craig, correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't some of these lobbyists who also pleaded guilty, weren't they staffers for Meekoff or somebody in the legislature who kind of hit that revolving door pretty fast and got into the weed business as soon as they left their state jobs?
Yeah, not Meekoff, but one of them, both of them worked for legislators previously before becoming lobbyists. One of them, Brian Pierce, was the staffer for Clint Kesto, who was a state representative from Oakland County. He was the guy who led the committee that pushed this medical marijuana bill that created the licensing board through the legislature, the House Judiciary Committee. And essentially, as soon as this bill got through the House, Pierce quit his job as a staffer and became a lobbyist as the bill was kind of still moving forward. When Kesto left the legislature, he became a lobbyist. I don't know if he's still working as a lobbyist, but he became a lobbyist after leaving. Vincent Brown was a staffer for a Democratic representative named Bob Kosowski. After his time as a staffer ended, he became a lobbyist. I think Bob Kosowski is also a lobbyist. So there's a lot of examples of this revolving door spinning very quickly. We are a state that does not have a cooling off period between where someone who's in the legislature cannot become a registered lobbyist. We just saw this with the former House Speaker Jason Wentworth, that the same day that another former House Speaker is getting charged with bribery, you have Jason Wentworth announcing that he is going to register as a lobbyist after, a few months out of the top position in the state House. I mean, the revolving door is spinning very quickly right now, and it's something we're all going to keep watching.
I do have a quick question, if that's okay. And this is for either Craig or for Michael, or for both of you. Just how common is it when we're talking about licensing to have this kind of corruption? I mean, obviously, there's a long history with liquor licenses, and I mean, because you have a tremendous amount of power, right, to change people's business lives.
Very common in public corruption cases, because there are lower level folks like inspectors, building inspectors, that come and check out when you pull a permit to do something. They have to. In Detroit, I know when I was with the U.S. Attorney's Office, our corruption unit prosecuted several city inspectors because they have the power, like you said, Shawn, to provide something valuable, which is the permit or the license, whatever it is. And that certainly is something that the marijuana, legalizing marijuana essentially opened up a huge Pandora's box of corruption potential. And it's not just at the state level. It actually exists at the lower local government levels for every township and every city, because these areas need to be zoned for this business. and a lot of cities have specific zoning for medical and recreational marijuana now. And to get that approved, you have to get the majority of the city council or the township trustees to vote for it. And then you end up with people like Dean Reynolds, who was taking bribes in the Chuck Rizzo trash hauling scandal. And someone like that, there's lots of Dean Reynoldses out there, quite frankly, that are going to take money. And the marijuana business obviously generates a lot of cash, and cash is very hard to keep track of, and hard to root out. So yeah, it's with permitting and with licensing, it's very, very common. And it's been going on for a very long time.
One of the things that really strikes me, and I don't know if anybody caught this point that Craig was making, is these folks were under scrutiny from the beginning. People said this is rife with potential for abuse. People were speaking out. People were watching them, and they still did it. And I'll tell you, as someone who's talked to
they didn't learn their lesson from Kilpatrick?
Well, in Macomb County, they didn't learn their lesson from Kwame Kilpatrick. Steve Fishman goes out there and he argues that harsh penalties are not deterrents. And I logically say, no, of course, harsh penalties do scare people away. But in the very same city hall where Kwame Kilpatrick was convicted of corruption, we've had Andre Spivey, we've had Gabe Leland, we have 2 other council members under scrutiny. People are still doing it, which is staggering. But Rick Johnson, I've talked to him over the years, very convivial guy, very down-to-earth, very folksy guy, can be very candid, the kind of guy that you would like to go and have cookies in his office. But it turns out, by his own admission, he's a greedy piece of shit who's headed to prison more than likely, unless he sings like the biggest canary ever. And Michael, tell us a little bit. These guys, Craig, I think you said they were charged on an information. What's the significance of the way they were charged? And how can they, as those of us in the legal profession say, mitigate their damages by cooperating? That's Shawn.
Thank you. I'm going to take that.
I tell you that.
I'm going to write that down.
That's why I'm up here, baby. That's why I'm up here.
So wait, what was the question again?
I don't know. It was kind of long. I wish we had some broadcast professionals.
Oh yeah.
Craig, can you help me out?
Significance of information. Okay, so information is filed almost exclusively when the person who's charged in the information has agreed to cooperate, and that is because to get charged by an information, that means you're agreeing, as a defendant, you're agreeing to waive your right under the Constitution to be charged by way of a grand jury indictment. And those agreements only come into play when there's cooperation, and there's a not always when there's cooperation, but certainly there has to be an agreement to a plea. Because if you're not going to agree to plead guilty, you're not going to waive your right to a grand jury. So when you see an information, you know right away the defendant's going to be pleading guilty. And then
it's like they said, you got me, right?
You got me. And then, but the more telling thing, and although Mark Totten, the U.S. Attorney in the Western District of Michigan, doesn't want to come out and say there's going to be other people charged, he should have just rented he basically rented a giant billboard in neon lights saying more defendants to follow. And I say that because of the way that the plea agreements are which were publicly filed as well. They put right on Front Street the fact that all 3 of the defendants, all 4 of the defendants are cooperating. And that's pretty unusual, too, because typically cooperation agreements are filed separately and under seal, or sometimes not filed at all. And there's a reason for this. Everything that was done a few days ago was done purposely by Mark Totten to possibly send a message to other people that, we're not done here. We're going to go. And in fact, he said he vowed that the bribery investigation will be ongoing. And when he was asked specifically, are other people going to get charged? He says he declined to say, but he added this. He goes, "There's really not much more I can say, except that the people I've named are cooperating." Well, why would you even say that? In answer to the question, are other people going to be charged? So there are going to be other people charged, and these defendants are going to be helping. The one thing that is unusual, too, is typically in corruption investigations, the public official is the big fish. He's at the top of the pyramid of everyone that you're going after. So you don't typically cooperate the top person. So it makes me wonder, who else is out there? And that's what I thought when I saw this. Hey, they're cooperating their main target against others. I mean, are they just going to cooperate him against all the other people that paid him? Possibly, but maybe there are more public officials involved, and that's the intriguing thing to me.
Craig, didn't Snyder appoint Johnson to this board?
Yes, the way the appointment process worked is that the legislative leaders got to nominate people, and then the governor was supposed to pick from the nominees who got the board positions.
That's a pretty big fish.
What we have been able to dig out is that Arlen Meekoff, the former Senate Majority Leader, we know that he put forward Rick Johnson. We know that he really wanted Rick Johnson on this board, and he was pushing to get Rick Johnson on this board. There was some hesitation from the governor's team about whether to put Rick Johnson on this board. Eventually, Governor Snyder relented, put Rick Johnson on the board. And we know from our past reporting and what our sources are telling us, and there's been public confirmation of this from at least one former Snyder administration member, that the feds have been asking questions about how Rick Johnson got this board position. That's one thing that they have been looking at. So that is, I think you're hitting on something that is an important part of this.
So, Michael, could the trade up be Arlen Meekoff, who is the former Senate Majority Leader, or would it be the governor? I mean, what's the next level as you guys try and drive a prosecution up and get to the big kahuna?
Well, certainly if Johnson had other public officials working with him or getting possibly a piece of this the bribery money, those people could be in play. But what is interesting though is that the U.S. attorney basically burned all of the cooperators by coming forward and doing this. So that means there can't be any covert investigation happening with recorded calls being made by Johnson or the other three defendants. That's not happening. So it sounds like it's just all going to be an historical new charge against whomever is going to be at the end of this. But it could be the people that you mentioned.
And when you make an announcement like Totten did, is he saying, we're coming for you, come see us and make your deal now? Or is he saying, get your affairs in order because the knock on the door is coming?
Both. It's to motivate other people that might think they're going to get that knock on the door, so they go and they reach out to the FBI. That's certainly happened in the Kilpatrick investigation once, but it didn't happen really until Kwame was out of office. Thank you, ML.
I only voted for him the first time. I don't want to take credit for it. If
he didn't fall so hardly on those state charges, I mean, that got him out of the way, and then people started coming forward. But at one point I believe we had an 800 number that the FBI put out there saying, call this number if you have any information.
Really?
I believe there was.
Did you get like a football phone if you called in the first 5 minutes?
It was in my briefcase, and I could also launch nukes. But no, we did get lots of tips and calls, and I think it was from that number. But that's something I think we should have up all over Detroit and Lansing and Grand Rapids and everywhere in the state. It also helped me with business.
So, Craig, I know you got to get back to hopefully not scooping people, but anything else you can add? Any questions you have for Mike? I hope you're not taking notes during this, by the way. I thought.
No, he's making some great points. I would be curious.
He's probably wrong, so don't report anything.
I would be curious to ask Michael.
Yeah, don't quote me. This is all on background, by the way. All on background.
This is just between us. You know how big our audience is.
Nobody's listening anyway. Sorry, Emil.
So
they've been investigating this for 5 years. I mean, if they're doing their jobs, wouldn't they have already done those, call recordings, had people meet? That's what I keep thinking about. I mean,
you're right.
These people might have just agreed to this, but how long is it possible that these guys were working with them behind the scenes?
That's exactly right. That's what another point I was going to make is that this is a 6-year investigation, or almost 6 years. And like in the Kilpatrick investigation, for example, we had secured people like James Rosendahl, who was working for that Synagro company for the $1 billion sludge contract.
The crooked mullet.
Right. And to use that analogy with Monica Conyers, by the way, I would call these two fellows, Pierce and Brown, they would collectively be the Sam Riddle for Rick Johnson, who would be playing the role of Monica Conyers. So what I think happened is Rick Johnson probably set these two fellows up when they got out, because if you look at the location, you know this, Craig, the location that they used is in the same building where Rick Johnson's company was. He probably set the whole thing up, I'm guessing, and, told these fellows, hey, go out and tell people, hire us, and we'll will get those permits for you. That's probably what happened, and that's why I think that they did contact these folks years ago. And if you look at what the U.S. Attorney said, he said the investigation began in December of 2017, and the reign of Johnson as the head of the Michigan Medical Marijuana Commission or licensing board, that began in 2017. So right from Jump Street, they were looking at him probably. Like we were with Kwame. Like originally when Kwame came into office, it wasn't too long where we got an informant saying, hey, I had to pay Bernard Kilpatrick as a consultant in order to get a contract. So they probably got rumblings like that initially, and then they started their investigation.
What's amazing about that is I talked to some folks about Bernard Kilpatrick, he started his lobbying firm, I think, the day after his kid was elected or took office. I mean, it was pretty obvious how this was going to work. But I was talking to longtime business rep who had a good reputation, had a lot of experience working with City Hall. And at first, I was like, "What's your relationship with the mayor?" I was like, "We're having a hard time." Like a year later, I checked in with him. I said, "Hey, man, how's it going?" He's like, "Everything's great." I said, "What happened?" He said, "Well, we figured out who to hire." And I said, "What does that mean?" He's like, "We hired the mayor's dad." So now all our problems are taken care of. We had our fixer.
And it also provides that buffer. And I think that's something you guys were alluding to in your conversation earlier about how, this company C exists. But by making the bribe payers hire an intermediary, with Monica Conyers, it was Sam Riddle, it gave some plausible deniability to the bribe payer, saying, well, I was just hiring Bernard Kilpatrick's dad as a consultant. I assumed he was consulting. But really all it is a pass-through for a bribe.
Right. And I think as many of Bernard's clients found out, to Bernard's benefit, he rarely closed the deal. In fact, I remember talking to him in the hallway one time during the trial. I said, "So far the feds have proven that you were a shitty lobbyist." And he started laughing. He's like, yeah, he really thought that was his get out of jail card. And I think maybe that was a factor for the jury. I don't know. But Craig, hey, thanks very much. I was going to give you credit for breaking this big story, but it sounds like it's like 5 years old. This thing's been going on since December 2017. Thanks
what took you so long?
Thanks for getting off your ass.
No, I appreciate you all having me on. Thank you, Emil. It's always great to chat with you, man. Thank you.
Thanks, Craig.
Yeah, so please subscribe to the Detroit News, subscribe to the Free Press. It's ridiculously cheap, and you support this good work that brings this stuff to light. Craig and his team at the News, Robert Snell and the other folks there, they were reporting this story before it happened, and that's really where the Fourth Estate comes into this, because not only do we set the table for this, start writing these stories and raising the level of awareness in law enforcement about these relationships, because Craig's been working in the city in the Capitol every day for years. He knows that a meeting with somebody else is significant. Paul Egan for the Free Press, Dave Boucher, Claire Hendrickson, our team. When they write that so-and-so is doing something with somebody else and that's significant, they know that because they have the time there. They see the connections. It's like the Matrix. Some people see the ones and zeros and some people see the woman in the red dress. They see the woman in the red dress. And I think when the feds are looking at this, you guys aren't in there every day. You don't rub elbows with these people. In fact, based on my knowledge, you guys try and stay in the bushes as long as you possibly can. I got to believe this reporting where people say, this could be a conflict of interest is something that the feds are taking note of and saying, yeah, maybe we should pay a little attention to this.
Yes, definitely. I mean, right from the get-go, like we were talking about, the fact that it's marijuana, that's typically associated with crime and
plus you guys love to seize that,
politicians,
right?
You got drugs and politicians. Right,
and
for corruption.
Money everywhere.
A couple of things. First of all, I think you meant to say you see the ones and zeros because that's what's really there, right? You don't want to be fooled by the red dress. You see the ones and zeros. Does that make sense?
That's deep. I like that.
Well, no, but it's in the way the ones and zeros come together, you can see patterns and they form things. But I mean, to the uneducated, you see a 1 and you see a 0 and it means nothing. It's just random numbers.
Right. I understand. Oh, okay, but so you just said something that I think is really interesting here, Michael. You were talking about marijuana and season.
Write that down, ML. I said something.
I've been writing a lot of it. I just hope Craig isn't writing
So
it down.
just the bigger picture, the pragmatic view, and as a former prosecutor, what's easier? Who is it easier to go after? Before marijuana was legal, was it harder to go after the cops that were clearly on the take, right? And the folks that were dealing themselves. And also there was a certain amount of violence that went with that is now not there. So is it easier now, even
That's
though
white collar crime, right?
right.
In a way, it is.
Yeah.
So we kind of shifted from violent crime to white collar crime. Is it easier to go after the white collar criminals in a way? Because it felt like we were making a dent when it was illegal, really much at all. And society was paying, I would argue, a much stiffer price because of the violence, which is permanent.
Yeah, I mean, making everything legal takes out a lot of the violence, obviously. Is it easier to root out corruption now when with the violence, out of it? I would say the jury is out on that, but
Plus, you're not worried about police in the same way
well, the police
because they're not involved,
right.
at least with marijuana.
The thing to keep in mind, a couple things. Number one, this marijuana business, there's lots of marijuana selling that's going on now illegally still. And that's because there are a lot of people that don't want to go through all the hoops and pay Rick Johnson or, just even filling out the forms
Get a better
and having
deal.
background
Well,
checks.
It's cheaper. You're not paying the
Yeah,
tax.
that's the main
It's
thing,
heavily
right?
taxed, right?
And
It's licensed and
that's
taxed.
the next
Just
thing
like
I was-
cigarettes. People still smuggle cigarettes because you can get them cheaper out of the back of a van than you can at the bodega.
So that's still going on. But the other thing I was going to say is marijuana has the potential to be incredibly profitable. And I say that because right now it's not anywhere close to its potential because marijuana is still a Schedule I controlled substance. And that means under Section 280E of the tax code that people that are running a legitimate legal marijuana business, they cannot claim deductions for normal operating expenses of a business. Salaries to employees, not deductible. Rent, not deductible. Equipment, not deductible. Nothing's deductible except for the cost of goods sold. So essentially the
So
price.
it's very high overhead to run
So,
one of these businesses.
Very, very. And their tax rate is like 3.5 times what a normal tax
So
rate
that's
is.
got to change at some point.
So that will change. Most likely, the way it'll change is either marijuana becomes legal, which probably may not happen as quick as marijuana will be rescheduled. I think that's what's probably going to happen. It won't be Schedule I anymore. And then that 280E section I talked about only applies to Schedule I, selling Schedule I drugs. So once that happens, then businesses doing this legally will make a lot of money.
That might also shrink the black market too a little bit if it because it can be the weed itself will be a little bit more affordable through the dispensaries, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we still, even with legal stuff, and maybe it's different because you need a doctor to give you opioids, but I mean, prescription drugs, huge illegal market for that, even though
true.
they are legal depending on how you get them. So there's always going to be somebody looking for an angle. But yeah.
But you can't just walk into a dispensary and buy, an opioid.
Right. So there's that difference. But I think you hit on a hugely important point. Is that the marijuana business used to be? No, it happens every once in a while. We had our 200th
I wrote that
episode.
down.
That's 2. So we're averaging one every 100 episodes. But that notion of you can get it on the street corner, so you got to control that street corner. It's like, no, now you go in the front door, and it's a very nice shop, and they have comfy chairs, and they probably, have a vending machine. And I mean, it's become almost, when you see some of these, it's almost a boutique because they're trying to compete.
No, for sure.
You can go wherever you want, go to the nicest place. It's.
Is it wrong that I'd rather have the Ricks of the world on the take than your average street cop? I just, in terms of just the larger benefit.
I'm more worried about Pablo Escobar
for society.
than Officer Too Friendly, but.
No, for sure. But Pablo Escobar doesn't exist without an awful lot of law enforcement people in his pocket. He doesn't survive that long, right?
Or an awful lot of law enforcement people worried their families will be killed if they do their job.
That's a way to have them in their pocket. though.
Chiapas,
I think
yeah.
that goes along with bribery.
Exactly. No, for sure.
But
It's not just greed that they're in their pocket. It's fear too.
Right.
No question.
But I have to reject the notion that it's okay to have certain people crooked. I still prefer that nobody be crooked.
No, we're not saying
not
it's
realistic.
We're not saying it's okay, but that's what you just said is the key. It's not realistic. So where are we going to shift? Right? Where are we going to shift and then try to somehow police? It just seems like, wow, this is already blown open.
This feels like Rick Johnson's closing argument.
No. But the fact that these people are already in trouble this quickly into this fairly new thing, I think is a really good sign.
I think it says that somebody and I think the personality, for lack of a better term, of a federal law enforcement office, be that a prosecutor or FBI or IRS, CID or DEA or ATF or any of those, varies from administration to administration, from leadership to leadership. But I think what we found is whoever was running the team in this case did a great job, because if this thing was identified as a potential problem in December, the feds put something in their tickler file to say, let's keep an eye on this. And in 5 years, 4 people are potentially going to prison. This isn't, we've brought charges and we're going to have another year or 2 of trials. In 4 years or so, they've rounded up some of the worst actors in this business who may be telling him who the other powers behind the throne. 4 years may seem like a lifetime to a lot of people, particularly if you're paying college tuition during those 4 years, but that's a pretty quick turnaround.
That's my point. I just feel like that's fairly efficient. Whereas if you're trying to take out,
it's startlingly efficient.
How long did it take to get Escobar? Right? Now I know that's an extreme example, but there were lower level Escobars all over the country running marijuana before it was lit. Well, I know obviously I'm sure still some of that, but because it's not legal.
Wouldn't that be a good pot brownie, an Escobar?
Yeah.
As like a brand name?
Yeah.
Or was he more cocaine and heroin? I don't know. I don't know that much about that stuff. I live a pretty clean life, just drinking some water and having some grapes and
allegedly.
blueberries.
Did you say allegedly?
I did.
Yeah.
He's a defense attorney now, but otherwise he'd say you Escobar eating dirtbag. Now he's ready to.
I got your back now.
That's right.
But that's what's always so interesting to me is that we understand there's a certain level of human greed and avarice and all that sort of thing built into our DNA. It's just there. We're never going to get rid of that. So how do we?
What is the restraint, though, Shawn? What does it take to restrain
efficiently? Exactly. What's the most efficient way versus the cost of society? Well, I would say let's stop. Let's make getting murder out the number one thing, and then we go from there.
But people murder so they can control their weed market, or they.
Oh, for sure. So, but if we legalize, that was always to me the most important argument.
But maybe the flip side is, if you get the crooks out of the other business, there'll be nothing for people to kill over. So maybe you start at the bottom instead of say we're going to eliminate murder. Just eliminate all the things that lead up to murder.
Or just make things legal, right? So you're eliminating markets. That's what you're trying to do.
Well, if you made murder legal, it wouldn't be murder, right? It'd just be killing.
That's true. So it'd be like it used to be in the beginning of our country. Well, so there's some folks here that
we've
want
established
everybody
Shawn
armed.
is pro-killing.
No. Well,
I was mean to Austin Meadows, but Shawn
there are
is
politicians
pro-killing.
out there right now that want every teacher armed, for example. Not that we want to go down that rabbit hole, but yeah.
As someone who has a daughter with an education degree, and as I've written in the free press, you do not want her in a school with a gun. She doesn't want to have one, and you do not want her throwing shots down the hall.
It's ludicrous, but that's, yeah.
Well, I want to hear from Michael's. We said something about a minute ago about avarice and some other stuff, which brings me to the topic of Donald Trump. But before we get there, I want to tell you how you can save some money. David Hall and Hall Financial have the Smart Buy program. This is a great time to buy a home in Michigan, and housing inventory is on the rise. You can get ahead of the competition before the busy spring and summer home buying season is here. It's easier than ever to get into your new home with Hall Financial's exclusive Buy Smart program, giving you money towards your down payment. And, you can get pre-approved often on the same day. With most credible pre-approval in the industry, Hall Financial's 5-star certified pre-approval is the way you want to go. We can even connect you with a top realtor from their exclusive realtor network. Whether you're looking to purchase a new home or refinance your current home, you need to call Hall Financial first at 866-CALL-HALL. That's 866-CALL-HALL. You can chat with them online at callhallfirst.com. or find a link to their website on our website, which is mlsoulofdetroit.com. And when you go there, please let them know that you know about them because of this show. Now, thinking about retirement can be hard. It's like shoveling snow or YouTube, which I think I shovel snow faster than I get through going through the YouTube rabbit hole. You can try to cobble it together on the fly. Doesn't sound very comfortable to me. Or you can give Luke Nowacki and his team at Pinnacle Wealth Strategy a call to see if they can help at 248-663-4748. Securities and investment advisory services are offered through Royal Alliance Associates, Inc. Isn't that right, Joe?
Securities and investment advisory services offered through Royal Alliance Associates Inc. Member FINRA SIPC. Royal Alliance Associates Inc. is separately owned, and other entities and/or marketing names, products, or services referenced here are independent of Royal Alliance Associates Inc.
Diana Ross stars with ML Elric.
Diana Ross will be on next week. In the meantime, while Shawn takes a walk around the yard to have a smoke and meet with some of the leading prison gangs, Mike, what kind of gangs is Rick Johnson likely to run into if he does some time? And is he going to do some time? He's cooperating, right? I mean, if he brings them the head of every bad guy in the state of Michigan, is that enough for him to get a pass?
It's funny you should ask that, ML. Before I came onto the show, I was boning up on my Johnson research, and I looked into his...
Boning up on Johnson. Is this the Drew and Mike show? What happened here?
No, but I was looking at the documents, and I actually crunched his guidelines, because in the federal system, we have federal sentencing guidelines. So just as a treat to the listeners, I thought that I could explain what those guidelines are for Rick Johnson. So the way you determine your guidelines under the federal guideline sentencing is you get a number, which is your guideline number, and that number corresponds to a range of prison time. So I did the calculations for his guilty plea with the bribe amount being $110,000. He's looking at 37 to 46 months in federal prison. That's roughly 3 to 4 years in that range. But under this plea agreement, what it does is it allows him to cooperate and essentially cut his time in half. So at least in the Detroit U.S. Attorney's Office, when I was there, 50% reduction was common for really good cooperators. So if he's providing really good cooperation, agreeing to testify, et cetera, he'll probably get close to 50% off of that. So that's 18 to 23 months now, all of a sudden. But there's a really, really important thing that he's avoiding that you wouldn't know by just looking at the documents. In bribery cases, the amount of time that you're looking at under the guidelines is almost always a direct result of the value of the contract or the item that the official is being bribed about. So that's why when you go back to the Kilpatrick investigation with Synagro, that was a 10-year, $1.2 billion waste removal contract. And so that's why guidelines were incredibly high for Monica Conyers, so high that Judge Cohn in that case just disregarded them completely. But Judge Cleland in the Dean Reynolds matter, he looked at the amount of money that all these trash contracts were gonna bring, and he hit Dean Reynolds for the full amount, and that's why he's doing 17 years in federal prison for taking some, a relatively low amount of bribes. So here, what I'm getting at is Rick Johnson got his amount of money which, as I said, drives his guidelines. He got that limited to $100,000, which only gives him like an 8-point bump. But really, what is the value of a marijuana permit? The government could have argued, if the defendant didn't agree to this, the government could have argued that marijuana license could be worth millions of dollars, not $100,000. And his guidelines could have been more like Dean Reynolds, 17 years. So there's a lot of bargaining here that you can't really see from the surface. And if I were Rick Johnson's attorney, I would be very cognizant of that, and that would be a very important reason to enter into this plea deal.
Well, we saw that in the Morocco case, and I know you were a prosecutor on that case, so I don't know if you can talk about that. But when the feds allowed him to plead guilty to attempted bribery, and that he was basically found guilty or admitted to trying to obtain $6,500, as opposed to he was the head of a criminal enterprise that involved millions and millions and millions of dollars of county contract, that locked him in that formula to a very low number, because that whole notion of, well, how much money was really involved? And I don't want to say the feds allowed him to do that. He had a very good attorney, and I'm sure he convinced them that they weren't going to win on the big case. But they basically limited the amount of time that he would ever be facing by saying it was only $6,500.
Yeah. So when you look at the Morocco case, and not understanding the background, it looks to the typical person like, wow, you gave a great deal to the most culpable guy, the top guy. And that is not at all what happened. What happened in that case is that Anthony Morocco was engaging in extortion over a long period of time, I think about 20 years, when he was the commissioner of public works at Macomb County. And he could have been hit with a lot more time. But the reason that he was given this deal was because, number one, the critical witness against him, Dino Bucci, had passed away, and number two, the nature of the charges were not the bags of cash like you see, here with Rick Johnson, all this cash. What you saw, it wasn't bribery even; it was extortion. So extortion is a little different than bribery. Morocco was saying, "Hey, buy tickets to my parties for thousands of dollars, and if you don't do that, we'll see what happens to your soil erosion permit, which will sit on my desk, forever." So it was different, and so the government could have calculated a much higher sentence for Morocco. That would have required a more aggressive approach, which the government was not in a position to do because they didn't have the case against him. They just didn't. It wasn't a great case. So I know it's sad and it looks like an aberration, but there's a reason for it. Just like Gabe Leland, I know that you're still having fun with that case in your mind, but that case again, was Bob Carmack flying messages over your house saying, "Don't give Leland a good deal because I'm a crazy man." That's what those messages said to me when I saw those planes flying over my office.
Well, we mentioned YouTube with Luke Nowacki. That's a rabbit hole, YouTube, and we're about to get into one here, so I should probably cut it short because I know Shawn has to get to a press conference. But
I do. By the way,
there were lots of companies that were cited in the Morocco thing who could have been witnesses, and as far as Gabe Leland goes, he could have been required to resign long before he fell on his sword, which might have spared the taxpayers of Detroit his positive vote on a massive bond issue that we're all going to be paying for the next 30 years. But that's water under the bridge. I'm sorry, Shawn.
No, I just, not to change the subject, but I just realized because I got a different angle. Maybe it's the way you swiveled in a chair. Maybe it was the way that massive forearm of yours moved out of the way. But that's a Star Trek shirt. That's awesome.
It's Captain Kirk, just so you know.
Awesome.
I'm in the command chair here. I just thought there's some ambiguity about who's running the Enterprise here.
Ladies and gentlemen, the geeks in high school too can grow up to be successful. Look at ML Elric.
He's clearly the
Star Trek shirt on.
Clearly the boss. No, he's always been the boss.
The L is for Tiberius.
What a great shirt that is.
The L is silent. It's like pneumonia.
I knew they made those in adult sizes.
As you can tell, it's a little small. It's a youth double XL.
You've been working out. You're trying to show off.
It's for the
right.
It's for the generously proportioned 16-year-old. No, okay. So Michael, Trump is a federal case here, right? I mean, the paying of hush money for Stormy Daniels to shut up is a violation of campaign finance law, which is a federal law. There's all kinds of tax issues, probably undeclared income, blah, 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 blah. Yet he is charged in state court. Can you explain to us, as a former federal prosecutor, why this wasn't a federal court and whether or not Donald Trump is in trouble with this grand jury indictment that came down in New York? And, of course, in New York, local courts do use grand juries. In Michigan, we don't. The prosecutor will issue charges. So it's a little different, but it's not a federal case. It's a state case that Trump is facing in New York.
The feds passed. That's my answer. The Southern District of New York looked at the conduct and decided that this is not a federal case. And that's why there wasn't one. Could there have been one for campaign finance violations, just like the ill-fated prosecution of Jeffrey Feiger? Related to the John Edwards campaign, that could have happened, but it's not. When you're going to go after the president, which we'll get into what I have to say about the state prosecution, you don't you don't lead with the jaywalking charge, and that's essentially what this is. The charges in New York City are regulatory bookkeeping charges that require to be a felony. They require there be some underlying felony crime that the false statements in the books are covering up, and there really isn't anything that I can see of a crime that was being covered up. Catching and killing and paying people to take stories and not run them, that is not a crime, even though it's discussed in Alvin Bragg's statement of facts as if it were some heinous felony. It just isn't. It's not a crime. So I think those charges are going to fall apart. At the very least, they're going to be reduced to misdemeanors. That's what I think will happen. And I think it was a bad decision by the prosecutor that originally stopped the investigation when he was elected, and then probably gave into a lot of political pressure to bring them.
Well, there was a piece in the New York Times, I think Sunday before last, talking about Alvin Bragg's decision to let the case go, but then to restart it and build it from the ground up again. And I think there was some of the business and tax charges, but he let those go because there's a statute of limitations issue, whereas on the Stormy Daniels stuff, and you talk about it as being a regulatory case, and I thought that campaign finance case against Feiger was going to be a tough case just because people don't really care about campaign finance. Juries are not going to see that as a heinous crime. But in this case, the catch and kill may have swung an election. When you violate campaign finance law and you bury a story that could have made a difference in a very, very narrow election, that seems to me like a pretty serious crime. How are we supposed to deal with stuff like that?
In my business, back doing public corruption cases and deciding whether or not to charge people, we always had that question to each other, which is this crime or is this slime? Is it slimy? Yes. Is it unethical? Yes. Is it all those things? Yes. There's really not much illegal about it. I'm sorry to say. Should that have been a campaign contribution? I don't know. Was it? I'm not even sure how it violated the campaign finance laws. Certainly, the Southern District of New York.
It was campaign funds that were expended but not reported.
Well,
so you have to report.
So that would be very low on the scale of much lower even than the charges against Feiger that the jury rejected so many years ago here in Detroit. So really, all this is just, I guess, a forerunner of what's really going to happen. I think this summer we're going to see charges in at least one other jurisdiction, maybe two. I think we're going to see something from Special Counsel Smith. I think we're going to see an indictment of Trump federally.
That's on the classified documents.
The classified documents. I think there's going to be charges there related to the false statements that Trump purportedly made to his attorneys that he knew would be then repeated to federal law enforcement. I think that's going to be a charge, and I think there's a good chance that he could be charged. Trump could be charged with
in Georgia.
In Georgia, exactly, under state law for what he tried to do to change the outcome of the election. And then it's possible that there could be a federal charge based on January 6th there's a very, very clear statute that applies, which is attempting to interfere or interfering with an official proceeding. And that official proceeding would have been the counting of the Electoral College votes on January 6th. So I think the evidence is clear that he tried to do that. He said as much to his supporters. So, he's looking at serious charges for things that actually matter, as opposed to, in my view, what Alvin Bragg charged, which is, I'm not even sure what it is.
So as a prosecutor, you wouldn't bring the case in New York on Stormy Daniels, but you would bring the other cases.
From what I can't say that I would bring them without seeing all the evidence, but if the evidence is what I think it is, I would likely bring charges against Trump for what. And I know more about the January 6th because of the committee hearings than I do about the classified documents. So I would say, I think there's enough evidence there to charge him. There's certainly probable cause, but the question is can you win, and do you have a likelihood of winning? Because that's the Department of Justice's standard to bring a charge. You not only have to have probable cause to go to a grand jury and ask them to indict, you also have to believe that there's a reasonable likelihood that you'll win at trial, which means a reasonable likelihood that 12 unanimous jurors will find beyond a reasonable doubt that Donald Trump is guilty. So that I haven't done that analysis. That's what I would have to wrap my mind around before I actually charged.
Well, Michael, thanks for the insight, and I hope you can take this Michael home today. But I do have to excuse myself. Sorry.
Yeah.
To get to an interview.
So before Shawn goes,
Do you need representation?
Before Shawn
I
goes,
hope not, but I know if I do where I can call.
we're going to get to our Geek of the Week, and then Shawn is going to make his adieu.
Oh man, the geeks have inherited the earth.
Did I do that?
What a dork.
Does him wanting to play with us again mean that he's turning into a geek, or we're turning into cool guys?
So my Geek of the Week was going to be a guy who knocked over a pharmacy in Macomb County while wearing a tether. I mean, it's really tough to argue you weren't there when your own ankle says you were there.
Who is it now?
It could be Luke Nowacki. It's me. Because you're right, I should not have been picking on Austin Meadows. I regret that. It wasn't the right thing to do. I'm sorry that he's not able to perform because of whatever his performance anxieties are. I hope they only extend to what's going on the field, and I hope he feels better. But yeah, we gotta be sympathetic to him and
Go after Baez all you want. I mean, right?
Really, you hate him?
No, it's not that I hate him. He's fair game though.
Yeah, picking on athletes is easy.
I don't love doing it necessarily, but I know a lot of fans do. It makes them feel better. They get frustrated.
Well, you were all over that center. Would you call him a dunderhead or something? You really got in his face.
Oh, yeah, he was not happy with me. Matthew Stafford had to hold him back from me.
Yeah,
I would have lost that in 2 seconds.
You called him, I think you called him a goober.
Dunderhead, because he was flipping the fans off, right? Which you, among other things.
Well, where I come from, dunderhead is fighting words.
He and I ended up working it out, though. I mean, I probably went a little bit too far. I said, hey, you're right. I shouldn't have used that word. And
would you use that word in church? I don't think so.
That was a very valuable lesson.
Right. Can you speak to your mom with that mouth?
That's right.
Oh, yeah, exactly. No.
So actually, you know what?
I mean, if I look up in the heavens and talk to her, sure.
Now that I think about it, I made a.
I'm so sorry.
No, don't worry about it.
An offhand remark that
I'm just having fun.
I regret, but you called somebody a dunderhead. So Shawn Windsor.
What does that mean? I'm sorry, I've never heard.
You are our Geek of the Week.
Just being foolish, right, and not thinking. I mean, a blockhead, whatever. But there were plenty of ways to say what I needed to say without resorting to name calling. So that was
you bust out an insult from Victorian England. You dunderhead. You're disingenuous mountebank.
The point is, just say what you think. You know what I mean? Instead of resorting to that. In any case, it's been fun. It's good to see you, Michael.
Great to see you, Shawn.
I got a roll. Miss Captain Kirk over here. Hopefully you can stay with him for a little bit longer and take him home.
Number
safely.
2, make it so.
Okay.
That's what a captain says.
Okay, make it so. I like that.
And by the way, now this is not calling anybody anything, but I would love you to ask Troy Weaver, do you regret any of the dunderheaded moves that have been made? You're not calling him a dunderhead. You're characterizing some actions. Right?
Killian Hayes has not worked out. He's got a couple of young guys this year, though, that look pretty good. So it's,
So Killian Hayes dunderheaded move.
It's not worked out. That was a really tough draft. We don't want to go down that.
Don't you get out of here.
We got to go. I got to go. It's good to see you, boys, and we'll see you next week.
And you know what? We have something in room 7609 that Shawn is going to love, but I know he'll hear it when he listens to the replay because,
of course I will.
Like a lot of people, he likes to watch us on YouTube, and you can subscribe to our channel at Soul of Detroit. Please subscribe, like it, hit the bell for alerts so you know when we go live because we often don't know that ourselves. Or you can watch us on Facebook. Or, you know what? It's kind of nice just to listen every once in a while. I'm sure Shawn will be listening later on as he takes a moment of quiet reflection and continues to regret his incredibly caustic comment to that dunderhead from the Detroit Lion. Have you ever called anybody that, Mike? I mean, would you bring charges on that?
I thought of The Office.
Is that a hate crime?
I've never heard that saying.
Yeah.
It's probably some kind of crime.
It does feel like it's
crime against the king.
Yeah, it does seem like it's not appropriate. Well, Mike, we have a couple more parts of the show. I don't know if you need to get back to work and defend the improperly charged, but this is a great time for us to get into our room 769 because we have a special treat for you this month. We are looking at new music that rips off or maybe just is inspired by new wave, and that's coming up in just a second in room 7609.
There's an all-night party in room 7609. And you can dance together all night if you've got the time.
Room 7609 is where you go to find great music. And there's another place you go to find great music on the east side or from anywhere in wherever you can hear the sound of my voice. I encourage you to go to the Caju Cafe, where tonight it's karaoke from 8 to midnight. On Thursday, it's Blue Thursdays. This week, it's Carl Caballero and the Wreckage, a Detroit Blues Society event. Friday, Motor City Josh and the Big Three. Saturday is On the Rocks. Sunday is Eric Goebel's Sunday Fun Day Jam featuring Badman Luther Keith. The Badman is there. I'm going to be out of town for Greek Easter. Damn it, I want to see Luther Keith. Monday is Blue Mondays, Open Blues Jam with Bobby East, Pat Simley, and friends. It's also Muscle Madness, where you can get all-you-can-eat mussels. And that's something that's worth thinking about, too, because there's not only a lot of fun there. There's pinball, there's feather bowling, great food. The kitchen's open till midnight every night, but Sunday when it closes at 10 o'clock, there's always something great going on at Caju Cafe, inside, outside. Find out all about it by going to their website. That's cajucafe.com, CADIEUX, cafe.com. It's a Belgian bar with a French name, and it's on the east side. That's the Caju Cafe. Now, this week, we have a great suggestion from one of our listeners on a fantastic modern piece of music. I'll say more recent piece of music that takes on some new wave, and it doesn't take on me. That was last week. This week, we have the Notorious B.I.G., and I think this one's going to be pretty easy to figure out which new wave band inspired him.
Notorious.
Like, really easy.